Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship Wanderer, watching the stars through the main window. He had been out here for 18 months with his crew of 12 people. Their job was simple: explore new parts of space and map what they found. But space was never really simple. Jake was 42 years old, with gray hair starting to show at his temples. He had been a ship captain for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for what happened next. "Captain," called Dr. Emma Walsh from her science station, "I'm picking up something strange." Emma was the ship's science officer. She was 35 with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She had studied space signals for most of her adult life, but she had never seen anything like this. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, walking over to her station. "It's a signal, but it doesn't make sense. Look at these readings." Emma pointed to her screen. Numbers and lines danced across it in patterns that hurt to look at. "The energy output is impossible, and the mathematical patterns... Captain, this suggests intelligence, but the source is coming from a dead system." Jake studied the data. His crew had mapped this area of space 3 weeks ago. The star system was empty except for dead planets and cosmic dust. Nothing could live there. "Could it be an echo from somewhere else?" Jake asked. "No, sir. The signal is definitely coming from System X-47, but according to our scans, that system died millions of years ago when its star collapsed." Lieutenant Tom Ridge looked up from the weapons station. Tom was Jake's security chief, a big man with steady hands and a calm voice. "Could be a trap, Captain. Pirates sometimes use fake signals to lure ships." "From a dead system?" Emma shook her head. "Tom, this energy signature doesn't match anything in our databases. It's not human technology. It's not like any alien tech we've encountered either." Jake felt something pull at his mind. The signal called to him in a way he couldn't explain. It was like hearing a song from childhood that you couldn't quite remember, but it made you feel homesick anyway. "Captain?" Emma's voice seemed to come from far away. "Your orders?" Jake blinked. He had been staring at the signal readings for several minutes without realizing it. "Plot a course for System X-47. "Sir?" Tom stepped closer. "Protocol says we should report unknown signals to headquarters first. Protocol also says we're explorers." Jake walked back to his captain's chair. "Our job is to investigate the unknown. Set course for X-47, maximum speed." Emma looked worried. "Captain, I really think we should be careful. These energy readings are off the charts. We don't know what we're dealing with." But Jake had already made up his mind. Something about the signal felt important, like it was meant for him personally. He couldn't explain why, but he knew they had to go. The Wanderer changed course and jumped to light speed. The journey to System X-47 would take 6 hours. Jake spent most of that time staring out at the stars, feeling restless. He couldn't stop thinking about the signal. During the trip, strange things began to happen. Crew members reported odd dreams. Engineering Chief Mike Johnson said he dreamed of walking through crystal cities under 2 suns. Communications Officer Lisa Park dreamed of flying through space without a ship, breathing starlight. Emma came to Jake's quarters 4 hours into the journey. "Captain, I think the signal is affecting us somehow. Half the crew is reporting unusual dreams. Always the same themes: crystal cities, twin suns, flying through space." Jake had been having the same dreams, but he didn't tell Emma that. In his dreams, he walked through corridors made of living light. He heard music that sounded like mathematics. Most strange of all, he heard a voice calling his name, but it wasn't quite his name. It was close, but different. "Run full medical scans." "On everyone," Jake ordered. "If this signal is some kind of weapon..." "Already done. Everyone's perfectly healthy. Brain patterns are normal except for increased activity in the memory centers during sleep." Memory centers? The parts of the brain that store long-term memories. It's like the signal is trying to access old memories. But we don't have any memories of crystal cities or twin suns. Jake nodded, but privately he wondered about that. The dreams felt more like memories than fantasies. They felt real in a way. That made his normal life seem faded by comparison. When they reached System X-47, Jake understood why it was called dead. The star had collapsed into a neutron star, a dense ball of matter that twisted space around it. 3 dead planets orbited in the distance, their surfaces cracked and frozen. "Signal source located," Emma announced. "Captain, you need to see this." Jake looked at the main screen and felt his breath catch. Orbiting the neutron star was a structure that defied description. It was huge, maybe 10 kilometers long, but it didn't look like any ship or station he had ever seen. Parts of it looked mechanical, with smooth metal surfaces and geometric patterns. Other parts looked organic, like it had grown rather than been built. The entire structure pulsed with soft light that changed colors in patterns too complex to follow. Blues became purples, became golds, became colors that had no names. Just looking at it made Jake feel dizzy. "What is that thing?" Tom asked quietly. "Unknown," Emma replied, but her voice shook slightly. "It's giving off massive energy readings, but it's not threatening us. The signal is definitely coming from there." Jake stared at the structure and felt that strange pull again. Stronger now. It was like being homesick for a place he had never been. "Take us closer," he ordered. "Captain," Tom said carefully, "maybe we should send a probe first." "No, take us closer." Emma gave him a sharp look. "Jake, you're not acting like yourself. Ever since we picked up that signal, you've been different." She was right, but Jake couldn't help himself. The structure called to him. He had to go there. He had to see what was inside. "Maintain course," Jake said firmly. As the Wanderer moved closer to the mysterious structure, the dreams got stronger. Jake began to have flashes of memory during his waking hours, walking through halls of living crystal, touching walls that responded to thought, speaking with beings of impossible beauty. But they weren't his memories. They couldn't be. He had never been to this place before. Could he? The structure grew larger on the screen, and Jake felt like he was coming home after a very long journey. Somewhere in that alien construction, answers waited for him. Answers to questions he didn't even know he had. But as the Wanderer drew closer to the mysterious structure, Jake began to wonder if some answers were too dangerous to seek. The signal had already changed his crew's dreams. What would it do to their minds when they got closer? It was too late to turn back now. The structure filled their view, and Jake knew that whatever happened next would change everything. The signal had called them across the galaxy for a reason, and soon he would learn what that reason was, even if it cost him everything he thought he knew about himself. Jake Morrison stood in the docking bay, putting on his environmental suit. The mysterious structure had opened for them like a flower blooming, revealing a docking port that fit the Wanderer perfectly. That should have been impossible. No one had ever seen their ship design before. "Captain, I really don't like this," Tom Ridge said as he checked his weapon. "The structure knew we were coming. It opened exactly the right size port for our ship. That's not a coincidence." Emma Walsh finished running her scans on the docking area. "Atmosphere inside appears breathable, but I'd recommend keeping suits on anyway. The energy readings are still off the charts." Jake nodded, but barely heard them. Ever since they had docked, the pull in his mind had grown stronger. It felt like someone was calling his name from just around the corner, but not Jake. That other name from his dreams. The one that felt more real than his own. "Small team only," Jake decided. "Emma, Tom, and pilot Steve Carter. Everyone else stays on the ship and keeps engines ready." Steve was their best pilot, a quiet man in his 30s who could fly anything. He didn't say much, but Jake trusted him completely. The 4 of them walked through the airlock into the alien structure. Jake expected metal corridors like on human ships, but instead found himself in a tunnel that looked like it was made from living crystal. The walls pulsed with soft light that seemed to breathe. "This is incredible," Emma whispered, scanning everything with her equipment. "The walls are some kind of biomechanical hybrid, part grown, part built. I've never seen anything like it." As they walked deeper into the structure, Jake noticed that the corridor was changing. The walls shifted slightly, growing wider to accommodate their group. Symbols appeared on the surfaces, not carved or painted, but growing like plants. "Captain," Steve said nervously, "the path behind us looks different now." Jake turned to look. Steve was right. The corridor they had just walked through now looked completely different. The walls had moved and new passages had opened where none existed before. "The structure is adapting to us," Emma said, studying her readings. "It's learning from our presence and changing to accommodate us, guide us. I can't tell which." Tom kept his hand on his weapon, but Jake could see there was nothing to shoot. The structure wasn't threatening them. If anything, it felt welcoming, like coming home to a house that had been waiting for them. They walked for what felt like hours through corridors that changed around them. Sometimes the walls showed moving pictures, star maps, alien cities, faces of beings they didn't recognize. The images seemed to respond to their thoughts. When Jake thought about Earth, the walls showed pictures of blue skies and green forests. "It's reading our minds," Emma said quietly. "How is that possible?" Steve asked. "I don't know. But look." Emma pointed to the walls around Tom. They were showing images of weapons and battles, military formations, and tactical displays. "It's showing Tom things related to his interests and background." Jake looked at the walls near him and saw something that made him stop walking. The images showed a man who looked almost exactly like him, but wearing strange clothes and standing in a crystal city under twin suns. The man was with a woman of impossible beauty, tall and graceful, with eyes like stars. "Jake?" Emma touched his arm. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I think I have," Jake said quietly. They continued deeper into the structure until they reached what could only be the central chamber. It was enormous, with walls that curved up into darkness. In the center of the room stood a pillar of pure light that hurt to look at directly. And next to the pillar stood a woman. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with long hair that seemed to be made of starlight. Her skin was pale as moonlight, and her eyes held the depth of space itself. She wore a dress that looked like it was woven from the aurora borealis. She was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen, and looking at her made his heart break for reasons he couldn't understand. "Welcome," she said, and her voice was like music. "I have been waiting for you." Tom immediately raised his weapon, but Jake put out a hand to stop him. He stepped forward, feeling like he was walking through a dream. "Who are you?" Jake asked. The woman smiled, and it was like watching stars being born. "I am Lyra. And you? You are the one I have waited 10,000 years to see again." "I think you have me confused with someone else," Jake said. But even as he spoke, he wasn't sure that was true. Something about her felt familiar, like meeting an old friend after many years apart. "Do I?" Lyra stepped closer, and Jake could smell something like cinnamon and starlight. "Tell me, Kale, do you still dream of the crystal cities?" Jake's world tilted. Kale. That was the name from his dreams, the one that felt more real than Jake. "How do you know that name?" "Because it is your name. Your real name." Lyra reached out and touched his face with fingers that felt like cool silk. "You have forgotten, but I can help you remember." "Captain," Emma said urgently, "we should go, now." But Jake couldn't move. Lyra's touch sent waves of memory through his mind. He saw himself walking through crystal cities, flying between stars without a ship, standing with this woman on the edge of the galaxy watching the birth of new worlds. "Remember," Lyra whispered. And suddenly Jake did. The memories crashed into his mind like a tidal wave. He was Kale, explorer of the first human galactic empire. He was 10,000 years old, kept alive by technologies beyond current human understanding. He had loved this woman, this last of an ancient race called the Eternals. They had explored the galaxy together, watched civilizations rise and fall, guided younger races toward wisdom and peace. But something had gone wrong. A great catastrophe had swept across the galaxy. Humanity had been forced to retreat to a single world, Earth, and their memories had been wiped to protect them from the trauma. Only Lyra remained, waiting in this tomb of a station for the day humans would return to space. Jake fell to his knees as the memories overwhelmed him. He remembered everything now. His life as Kale, his love for Lyra, the golden age of humanity's first empire. His current life as Jake Morrison felt like a brief dream compared to the vast scope of his true existence. "I remember," he whispered. Lyra knelt beside him, her eyes bright with tears that looked like liquid diamonds. "My love, I knew you would return to me. I never gave up hope." Emma was scanning Jake with her medical equipment. "His brain activity is off the charts. Captain, what's happening to you?" But Jake could barely hear her. The memories of Kyle were so strong, so real, that his life as a simple ship captain was fading like smoke. He looked up at Lyra and saw the woman he had loved across the ages, the companion of his cosmic wanderings. "I've missed you," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Tom stepped forward, weapons still ready. "Lady, I don't know what you're doing to our captain, but you need to stop." Lyra looked at Tom with ancient eyes. "Your captain, as you call him, is far more than you know. He is the key to restoring humanity to its rightful place in the galaxy. Through him, your people can reclaim the stars that were once theirs." Emma grabbed Jake's arm. "Fight it, Jake. Whatever she's doing to you, fight it. You're Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Fleet. You have a duty to your crew and your world." Jake looked at Emma, and for a moment her face seemed strange and unfamiliar. Jake Morrison? Who was that? He was Kale, cosmic wanderer, lover of the eternal Lyra. This human woman meant nothing to him. But then Emma said something that cut through the alien memories like a knife. "Remember your first day at the academy, Jake. Remember how proud your father was when you got your commission. Remember the first time you saw Earth from space and knew you were born to explore the stars." For just a moment, Jake Morrison fought his way back to the surface of his own mind. He looked at Emma and remembered her laugh, her brilliant mind, the way she made him coffee just the way he liked it during the long watches. But Lyra placed her hand on his forehead, and Kale's memories surged back stronger than ever. "Sleep now, my love," Lyra whispered. "Let the false dreams fade. Remember who you truly are." And Jake Morrison began to disappear, replaced by memories of cosmic glory and eternal love that felt more real than anything he had ever known. Jake Morrison collapsed to the floor of the crystal chamber as 10,000 years of memories flooded his mind. He wasn't Jake anymore. He was Kale, and the life he thought he had lived was just a shadow of his true existence. He remembered flying between stars in ships made of crystallized thought. He remembered walking on worlds where the ground was made of music and the air tasted like poetry. He remembered standing with Lyra at the edge of the galaxy, watching the birth of new stars and guiding young civilizations toward wisdom. Most of all, he remembered loving Lyra with a passion that spanned millennia. "Kyle," Lyra whispered, kneeling beside him. "My beloved, you have returned to me at last." Emma knelt on his other side, her medical scanner beeping frantically. "His vital signs are all over the place. Captain, can you hear me? Jake, stay with us." But the name Jake sounded wrong to him now, like wearing clothes that didn't fit. He was Kale, cosmic explorer, guardian of the ancient knowledge. The human life of Jake Morrison felt like a brief fever dream. "I remember everything now," he said, his voice different somehow, older, carrying the weight of centuries. "The First Empire, the Great Catastrophe, the retreat to Earth. How long have you been waiting here?" 10,000 years, Lyra replied, her star-bright eyes never leaving his face. "I built this station around the neutron star to preserve the knowledge of our people. I knew that someday humanity would return to space, and when they did, I would be here to guide them home." Tom Ridge kept his weapon pointed at Lyra, but his hands shook slightly. "Captain, you need to snap out of this. You're Jake Morrison, not whoever she says you are." Kale looked at Tom with ancient eyes. "Lieutenant Ridge, a good soldier, but limited in understanding." "You cannot comprehend what you're witnessing, Jake," Emma said desperately. "Remember your mission. Remember Earth. Remember your crew who depends on you." For a moment, the name Emma stirred something in Kale's memory. A woman with brown hair and green eyes who made him laugh, who challenged his decisions with scientific logic. But the memory felt distant, unimportant compared to the vast scope of his true existence. Lyra stood gracefully, her dress of woven starlight flowing around her. "Come, my love, let me show you what I have preserved." She gestured to the walls of the chamber, and they came alive with images. Kyle saw the golden age of the first human empire, crystal cities that floated between worlds, humans who lived for thousands of years, technology that could reshape matter with thought alone. "This is what your people once were," Lyra said, "before the catastrophe forced them to retreat to one small world and forget their greatness. But I saved it all, the knowledge, the technology, the power. Through you, humanity can reclaim its birthright." Kale felt his heart surge with recognition and longing. This was real. This was truth. The small, limited existence of Jake Morrison was nothing compared to the cosmic glory that awaited. But Emma grabbed his arm, her touch somehow cutting through the ancient memories. "Jake, look at me. Really look at me. Remember who you are now, not who you might have been." Kale looked at Emma, and for a confused moment saw two different women. One was a simple human scientist, limited and mortal. The other was also Emma, but more real somehow. The Emma who had stood by his side through 18 months in deep space, who had trusted his decisions even when they seemed crazy, who had become more important to him than he had ever admitted. I remember," he said quietly. "But which memories were real?" Lyra's expression darkened slightly. "Do not let these shadows confuse you, Kale. The life of Jake Morrison was never real. It was a prison built by the catastrophe, designed to keep humanity small and afraid. I offer you freedom." Tom stepped closer, his weapon trained on Lyra. "Lady, I don't care what cosmic powers you have. Let our captain go, or we're going to have problems." Lyra looked at Tom with something like pity. "Brave little soldier. You would fight for a lie rather than accept a glorious truth." She raised her hand, and Tom's weapon simply dissolved into sparkling dust. Tom stared at his empty hands in shock. "I do not wish to harm you," Lyra said gently, "but I will not allow you to prevent Kale from claiming his destiny. Through him, I can restore what was lost. Humanity will take its place among the stars once more." Kyle felt the pull of that destiny like a river current. He wanted to dive into it, to reclaim the cosmic power that was rightfully his. But something held him back, a nagging doubt that felt suspiciously like Jake Morrison's practical nature. "What exactly does this restoration require?" he asked. Lyra smiled, beautiful and terrible. You must serve as the bridge between past and present. Your consciousness, expanded by our ancient knowledge, will carry the template needed to transform your people. Every human will be elevated to their true potential. And what happens to who they are now? Emma asked sharply. They become who they were always meant to be, Lyra replied. The Jake Morrison you know is just a shadow. When Kale reclaims his full power, that shadow will fade and he will become real. Emma's face went pale. You're talking about erasing billions of people's identities, turning them into something else entirely. Freeing them from a prison of ignorance, Lyra corrected. Kyle understands. Don't you, my love? Kale felt the weight of cosmic knowledge pressing on his mind. He could see the truth of what Lyra offered. Humanity elevated beyond their current limitations, restored to their proper place as shepherds of the galaxy. It was glorious. It was right. But then he looked at Emma's face, saw the fear there, and something inside him rebelled. Not Kale. Rebelling. Jake Morrison, the simple ship captain who had spent 18 months with this brilliant, caring woman. Jake, who had learned to love Emma's quick mind and sharp wit. Jake, who remembered the taste of coffee and the sight of Earth's blue skies. The people of Earth, Jake said, his voice battling Kale's for control. They're not shadows. They're real. They have lives, families, dreams. You can't just erase them. Lyra's expression grew sad. Oh, my beloved. The catastrophe damaged you more than I realized. These false attachments cloud your judgment. She placed her hand on his forehead again, and Kale's memories surged stronger than ever. He saw himself commanding fleets of crystal ships, reshaping, worlds with a thought, living the kind of life that made Jake Morrison's existence seem like a brief candle flame. But even as Kale's identity overwhelmed him, Jake Morrison fought back with memories of his own. The day he first saw the Wanderer and knew she would be his ship. The moment Emma smiled at him across the bridge and he realized she was more than just his science officer. The pride he felt when his crew trusted him to lead them into the unknown. Simple memories, human memories. But somehow they felt as real and important as all of Kale's cosmic adventures. Choose, my love, Lyra whispered. Reclaim your true self and help me restore humanity to greatness, or cling to shadows and watch your people remain forever diminished. Kale wanted to choose the stars. Jake wanted to choose Earth. And somewhere, between them, the man who was both and neither struggled to find his way home. On the walls around them, images flickered between two visions. The golden crystal cities of humanity's past, and the blue-green world where 12 billion people lived their small, precious lives, unaware that their existence hung in the balance. Emma reached for his hand. Jake, whatever you choose, remember that we're here with you, your crew, your friends. We believe in the man you are now, not the man you used to be. Tom nodded grimly. We've got your back, Captain. Whatever you decide, we'll face it together. And in that moment, both Jake and Kale realized something important. Love wasn't just about cosmic destiny or eternal passion. Sometimes it was about people who stood by you when the universe tried to change you into someone else. But Lyra's power pressed against his mind like a tide, and he wasn't sure which version of himself would survive the choice he had to make. Kale stood in the crystal chamber, torn between two identities that felt equally real. As Lyra's hand touched his forehead, he could feel Jake Morrison slipping away like sand through his fingers. The cosmic memories were so much larger, so much more significant than the brief life of a simple ship captain. I can show you everything, Lyra whispered, her voice like celestial music. The technology to reshape worlds, the knowledge to guide entire civilizations, the power to live forever among the stars. This is your true inheritance, Kyle. The walls around them lit up with new images. Kale saw massive space stations that housed millions of beings, planets transformed into gardens of impossible beauty, stars themselves harnessed to power civilization. It was humanity's lost empire, and it could be theirs again. "All of this?" he asked, his voice heavy with wonder. "All of this and more," Lyra confirmed. "The Eternals developed these technologies over millions of years. When we first met your people, they were primitive, barely able to travel between planets. But we saw their potential, their hunger for knowledge and growth. We helped them become something magnificent." Emma stepped closer, her scanner still beeping frantically. "Jake, her energy readings are off the charts. Whatever she's doing to you, it's changing your brain patterns at a fundamental level." But Cale barely heard Emma. He was lost in the memories Lyra shared with him, memories of walking between worlds, of solving cosmic mysteries, of wielding power that could create or destroy entire solar systems. Compared to this, Jake Morrison's life felt like a child's game. "Yes," he said slowly. "I remember now, the first time we met, on the crystal world of Valeria. You taught me to hear the music of the spheres." Lyra smiled, radiant with joy. "You do remember. My beloved Kyle, we can have it all back. But the restoration requires a willing consciousness to serve as the bridge. You must open yourself completely to the ancient knowledge, let it flow through you to reach every human in the galaxy." "What does that mean exactly?" Tom asked, his soldier's instincts picking up on something dangerous in Lyra's words. Lyra turned to him with patient grace. "Your people are scattered across many worlds now, but they are all connected by quantum entanglement patterns established during the First Empire. Through Cale's expanded consciousness, I can reach every human simultaneously and trigger their restoration." Emma's face went white. "You're talking about altering the minds of every human being alive, without their consent. I'm talking about freeing them from a prison they don't even know exists," Lyra replied. "The catastrophe that ended the First Empire wasn't just a physical disaster. It was a psychic trauma so severe that humanity's collective consciousness retreated into primitive patterns to protect itself. Your people have been living in a reduced state for 10,000 years. Kyle felt the rightness of this deep in his bones. Humanity had been diminished, cut off from their true potential. Through him, they could reclaim their birthright. It was not just an opportunity, it was a responsibility. But something nagged at him, a small voice that sounded suspiciously like Jake Morrison. What happens to who they are now, their personalities, their relationships, their individual dreams? They become who they were always meant to be, Lyra said simply. The Jake Morrison identity was never real, my love. It was a shell built by traumatic amnesia. When the restoration is complete, you will be fully Cale again, and every other human will likewise become their true selves. Emma grabbed his arm. Jake, listen to yourself. You're talking about erasing the identity of every person on Earth. My parents, my sister, everyone I've ever known, they'd all become different people. Better people, Cale said. But he felt Jake Morrison stirring uneasily in the back of his mind. More than they ever imagined they could be. But not themselves, Tom said grimly. You'd be committing genocide of a different kind. Killing who? People are to replace them with who you think they should be. Lyra's expression grew cold. Ignorant child. You cannot kill a shadow. You can only dispel it with light. She gestured, and the chamber filled with more images. Humans, as they had been during the Golden Age. They were beautiful, wise, and powerful beyond current human understanding. They lived for thousands of years, explored mysteries beyond imagination, and guided the development of younger races with patient wisdom. This is what your people threw away, Lyra said. This is what I offer to restore. And you, she looked at Tom and Emma, would refuse this gift out of attachment to a diminished existence? Cale felt the pull of cosmic destiny like a tide in his blood. The power to reshape reality itself was within his grasp. He could lift humanity from their current limitations and restore them to greatness. How could he refuse such a responsibility? But Emma's next words cut through his cosmic certainty like a knife. Jake, remember the first time you took command of the Wanderer. Remember how scared you were that you weren't good enough, but you did it anyway because your crew needed you. That fear, that determination, that was real. That was you. For a moment, Jake Morrison surfaced in his consciousness. He remembered standing on the bridge of his first command, terrified that he would make a mistake that got his people killed. But he had faced that fear and done his duty anyway. It had been the most real moment of his life. Those feelings were just echoes of Cale's true nature, Lyra said quickly, sensing his wavering. The courage of a cosmic explorer, diminished by the limitations of human existence. But Jake's memories kept coming. The first time Emma had laughed at one of his jokes, the quiet satisfaction of a mission completed safely, the simple pleasure of coffee in the morning and a good book before sleep. Small things, human things, but they felt as vast and important as any cosmic mystery. I need time to think, Cale said. Lyra's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. Time? My beloved, I have waited 10,000 years for this. Moment! How much more time do you need? He needs time to remember who he is, Emma said firmly. The real Jake Morrison, not this cosmic persona you're imposing on him. Jake Morrison is an illusion. Lyra's voice carried the weight of stars. A trauma response that has imprisoned Cale's true consciousness for decades. I offer him freedom, and you would chain him to shadows. The crystal chamber shook with her emotion, and Cale felt the full weight of her power pressing against his mind. She could force the transformation if she chose. He could feel her restraining herself only, out of love for what they had once shared. Choose now, Lyra said, her voice soft but implacable. Accept your true identity and help me restore humanity to greatness, or cling to a false life and watch your people remain forever diminished. Cale looked at the cosmic vistas displayed on the walls, then at Emma and Tom standing beside him. Two futures lay before him, one vast beyond imagining, the other small but precious in its reality. And somewhere in the space between Cale and Jake Morrison, a man who was both and neither began to understand that the choice wasn't really about cosmic destiny or human limitations. It was about love, and what love really meant. If I agree to this, he asked slowly, what happens to Emma? To Tom? To my crew? They will become who they were always meant to be, Lyra replied. Better versions of themselves, freed from the constraints of diminished existence. But not the people I know now. No, Lyra admitted. Not as you know them now. Cale looked at Emma and felt both cosmic love for an eternal companion and simple human affection for a brilliant woman who had stood by him through the dangers of deep space. Both feelings were real. Both mattered. I need to understand something, he said to Lyra. Do you love me as Cale? Or do you love what I represent? Your chance to undo the past? Lyra's perfect face showed the first crack in her composure. I love you, my eternal companion. That's not what I asked. And in the silence that followed, both Jake Morrison and Cale began to understand the true nature of the choice they faced. While Cale struggled with Lyra's offer in the crystal chamber, the effect of the ancient station spread throughout the Wanderer like ripples in a pond. The crew members left behind began experiencing their own transformation. In the engine room, Chief Mike Johnson stopped working on the power regulators as alien memories flooded his mind. He saw himself as someone named Marcus, chief engineer of a massive crystal ship that traveled between galaxies. In those memories, he didn't fix machines. He communed with them, speaking to their artificial spirits and guiding their growth like a gardener tending living plants. "This is impossible," Mike whispered. But even as he spoke, his hands moved across the Wanderer's controls with new understanding. He could feel the ship's pain where components were stressed, hear its contentment when systems ran smoothly. The Wanderer was alive in ways he had never imagined. In her quarters, Communications Officer Lisa Park sat staring at a photo of her family on Earth. But the faces in the picture kept changing, becoming strangers with star-bright eyes and clothes made of woven light. In her new memories, she was called Aria, and instead of speaking across space through machines, she could touch minds directly across the galaxy. "Mom? Dad?" she whispered to the shifting photo, but the faces of her parents were fading like smoke. In their place, she saw beings of terrible beauty who had raised her in crystal towers under alien suns. Navigator Paul Wright found himself remembering cosmic charts that mapped not just space, but time itself. As Navigator Thane, he had guided ships through dimensions that folded space like origami. The simple three-dimensional navigation he had learned at the Academy seemed like a child's toy compared to the vast knowledge pressing against his mind. But even as the alien memories grew, stronger, something in each crew member fought back. Mike remembered his daughter's laugh when he taught her to fix her first bicycle. Lisa held tight to the memory of her mother's voice singing her to sleep. Paul recalled the pride in his father's eyes when he graduated from the Academy. Emma, monitoring the crew from the bridge, watched their vital signs fluctuate wildly. "They're all experiencing the same neurological changes that are affecting the captain," she reported to herself, since Jake was still in the alien chamber. "But some of them are fighting it." She opened a ship-wide communication channel. "This is Dr. Walsh. I know you're all experiencing strange memories right now. But remember who you are. Remember why you joined this mission. Remember Earth." Her words seemed to help. The crew members' brain patterns stabilized slightly as they focused on their human identities. But Emma could see it was a losing battle. The alien memories were too vast, too seductive. One by one, her crewmates were forgetting their human lives. Back in the crystal chamber, Kale felt his crew's transformation through some cosmic connection he couldn't understand. Part of him rejoiced. They were being elevated, freed from their limitations. But Jake Morrison's part of his consciousness felt only horror. "You're doing it already," he accused Lyra. "Changing my crew without their consent." Lyra looked genuinely confused. "I am doing nothing. The station responds to your presence, awakening the dormant memories in all humans who come near. It is automatic, like recognizing family after a long separation." "They don't want these memories," Jake said, fighting, his way back to the surface of his consciousness. "They want to be themselves. They want to be free," Lyra corrected. "But they don't understand what freedom means because they have been prisoners so long they think their chains are natural." Tom, still standing guard despite having no weapon, spoke up. "In my experience, anyone who talks about freeing people against their will is usually trying to enslave them." Lyra's eyes flashed dangerously. "Speak carefully, little soldier. You understand nothing of cosmic truth." But Tom had spent years learning to read people, and something in Lyra's reaction told him he had hit a nerve. "Maybe not. But I understand people, and I know that real love doesn't force change on someone. It accepts them as they are." Emma nodded, her scanner detecting new energy spikes from Lyra. "Jake, look around you. Really look. She's not just preserving the past, she's trapped in it. This whole station is like a tomb, and she's been its only inhabitant for 10,000 years. For the first time, Kale looked at the crystal chamber with clear eyes. Emma was right. For all its beauty, the station felt dead, preserved like a museum. And Lyra, despite her cosmic power, felt frozen in time, unable to move forward. "You never left this place, did you?" he asked quietly. "In 10,000 years, you never left this station." Lyra's perfect composure cracked slightly. "I couldn't leave. I had to preserve the knowledge, guard against its loss. Someone had to remember." "But the Eternals chose to let go," Jake said, memories from both identities combining. "They chose to let their civilization end naturally. You're the only one who refused to accept that ending." "Because ending is death." Lyra's voice carried the pain of millennia. "Because everything beautiful and wise and good deserves to continue forever." Emma stepped closer to Jake, her presence somehow anchoring his human identity. "But that's not how life works. Things change, grow, evolve, even end sometimes. That's what makes them precious. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear Mike Johnson's voice, strained but determined. "Engine room to bridge. I don't care what these memories are trying to tell me. I know who I am. I'm Mike Johnson from Detroit, and I've got a daughter who needs her daddy to come home." "Lisa," Park's voice followed. "Communications to bridge. These visions, they're beautiful, but they're not mine. I choose to be Lisa Park, who talks to her mom every Sunday and makes terrible coffee." One by one, the crew began to assert their human identities, clinging to simple memories that felt more real than cosmic glory. The sound of their voices seemed to strengthen Jake Morrison's presence in Cale's fractured consciousness. "Listen to them," Emma urged. "Your crew is choosing to remain human, even when offered godhood. Maybe there's wisdom in that choice." Lyra looked stricken. "But they don't understand what they're refusing. The beauty, the knowledge, the eternal life among the stars." "Maybe they do understand," Jake said gently. "Maybe they understand that being human isn't about being perfect or eternal. Maybe it's about being real." "Real?" Lyra's voice was puzzled. "But the cosmic truth is more real than any small human life." "Is it?" Tom asked. "You've been alone for 10,000 years talking to memories and dreams. When was the last time you had a real conversation with someone? When was the last time you laughed with a friend or felt proud of something you built with your own hands?" Lyra stared at him as if he were speaking an alien language. "Such things are small, temporary." "Yeah," Tom agreed. "And that's what makes them matter." Emma pulled up readings from the station itself. "Jake, look at this. The energy patterns aren't just preserving knowledge, they're in a repeating loop. The same thoughts, the same memories, over and over for 10,000 years. She's not preserving the past. She's trapped in it." Cale felt a chill as he understood. Lyra hadn't been waiting for humanity's return. She had been reliving the same cosmic memories endlessly, unable to accept that the past was gone. Her offer to restore humanity wasn't about love or wisdom. It was about her desperate need to make the past real again. "The catastrophe that ended the First Empire," he said slowly. "It wasn't just a disaster, was it? It was a choice. The Eternals and the humans of that time chose to let their civilization end rather than preserve it artificially." Lyra's face went pale. "They chose death. I chose life." "No," Jake said, his human identity growing stronger with understanding. "They chose growth, change, the courage to let something beautiful become something new. You chose stagnation. And now you want to force that stagnation on 12 billion people who never asked for it?" Emma added. Lyra looked around the crystal chamber, and for the first time in millennia, she seemed to see it clearly. A tomb, a prison, a beautiful cage that she had built for herself and now wanted to share with the entire human race. "But if I let go," she whispered, "everything will be lost forever." "No," Jake said gently, feeling both his identities merge into something new and whole. "It will be free to become something new." The choice was becoming clear. Not between Jake Morrison and Cale, but between growth and stagnation, between love and possession, between the courage to change and the fear of letting go. And in the depths of the crystal station, something that had been locked in an eternal loop for 10,000 years began to crack. The crystal chamber began to shake as Lyra's carefully maintained control started to crack. For 10,000 years, she had held the ancient knowledge in perfect stasis, but now doubt crept into her cosmic certainty like water into stone. "You don't understand," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ages. "I have seen what happens when civilizations are allowed to evolve naturally. They make mistakes. They suffer. They destroy themselves with wars and greed and ignorance." Jake felt both his identities, Cale and Jake Morrison, responding to her pain. As Cale, he remembered the golden age when suffering was rare and wisdom guided every decision. As Jake, he remembered the messy, imperfect, beautiful reality of human existence. "But that's their choice to make," he said. "Suffering and mistakes are part of growing up." Lyra's eyes flashed with something between love and fury. "I will not allow the people I love to choose suffering when I can give them perfection." She raised her hands and power flowed from her like visible light. Jake felt his consciousness being pulled deeper into Cale's memories, his human identity dissolving like mist in sunlight. Around him, the station's influence reached out toward the Wanderer with new force. On the ship, Mike Johnson collapsed in the engine room as the alien memories overwhelmed him. "I am Marcus," he whispered, his voice changing. "Chief engineer of the stellar song, commander of living ships that sail between galaxies." But even as Marcus's knowledge flooded his mind, Mike held on to one simple truth. His daughter Jenny, age 7, who loved strawberry ice cream and bedtime stories about brave space explorers. That love was more real than any cosmic memory. "No," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm Mike Johnson, and I promised Jenny I'd come home." The battle between human identity and cosmic knowledge raged throughout the ship. Lisa Park fought to remember her mother's face, while alien memories tried to convince her that her real family lived among the stars. Paul Wright clung to his memories of Earth's Academy, while his mind filled with knowledge of interdimensional navigation. Emma, monitoring from the bridge, made a desperate decision. She opened a channel to Earth's communication network, broadcasting recordings of human voices, families talking, children laughing, people singing old songs from home. The sound of humanity reached into the crystal chamber, and Jake Morrison fought his way back to consciousness. These were his people, imperfect, struggling, beautiful people who deserved the right to choose their own destiny. "Stop," he told Lyra, his voice carrying both Cale's authority and Jake's determination. "This isn't love. This is possession." Lyra's face contorted with pain and rage. "How can you choose ignorance over wisdom? How can you choose death over eternal life?" "Because it's my choice to make," Jake replied. "And theirs." "No!" Lyra's power lashed out like a storm. "I will not lose you again. I will not watch humanity destroy itself through foolish pride." The station around them began to change, its beautiful crystalline walls becoming twisted and sharp. Jake realized that Lyra's perfect preservation had been maintained through sheer force of will, and now that will was breaking down. Through the ship's communication system, he could hear his crew fighting their own battles. Tom Ridge's voice came through clearly. "Security to all hands. Remember your training. Remember your oath. We are human beings, citizens of Earth, and we choose our own path." Emma's voice followed. "Medical to all crew. Focus on real memories. The smell of rain, the taste of your favorite food, the face of someone you love. These things are real. These things are yours." One by one, the crew began to reassert their human identities, using the simple, precious memories of mortal life to anchor themselves against the tide of cosmic knowledge. But Lyra was not finished. With a cry of anguish that shattered crystal formations throughout the chamber, she poured the full force of her will into Jake's mind. He felt Kale's memories surge like a tsunami, threatening to wash away every trace of Jake Morrison forever. In that moment of crisis, Jake experienced the full scope of both lives simultaneously. He was Kale, cosmic wanderer who had loved Lyra across the ages, who had commanded fleets of crystal ships and reshaped worlds with a thought. And he was Jake Morrison, son of a small-town teacher who had worked his way through the academy and earned his captaincy through determination and sacrifice. Both lives were real, both had value, but only one was truly his. "I remember everything now," he said, standing steady as Lyra's power raged around him. "I remember being Kale, and I remember choosing to become Jake Morrison." Lyra stopped, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" "The catastrophe that ended the First Empire. It wasn't a disaster that happened to us. It was a choice we made, all of us, including Kale. We chose to give up cosmic power and become simply human again." The memories came flooding back now, not forced by Lyra but freely remembered. The great debate among the Eternals and their human partners. The growing realization that their perfect society had become stagnant, that their cosmic powers had isolated them from the simple joys of mortal existence. The humans of the First Empire had asked to be allowed to start over, to rediscover what it meant to be human without the burden of cosmic knowledge. And the Eternals, led by Lyra herself, had agreed to help them. "No," Lyra whispered. "That's not how it happened. The catastrophe was forced upon us. We were victims." "We were liberators," Jake corrected gently. "We liberated ourselves from the prison of perfection. And you were the one who suggested it." The truth hit Lyra like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her perfect composure finally breaking completely. I had forgotten. 10,000 years of isolation, of preserving what I thought was precious. I forgot why we let it go in the first place." Jake stepped toward her, feeling both compassion and determination. "You forgot that love means letting go, that growth requires risk, that life is precious precisely because it ends." Lyra looked around the crystal chamber as if seeing it for the first time. The beautiful preservation that had been her life's work suddenly looked like what it truly was, a tomb, a monument to fear of change. "But if I let go now," she said brokenly, 10,000 years of waiting will have meant nothing." "No," Emma said, stepping forward. "It will mean you finally learn to love enough to let go." The station shuddered around them as Lyra's will, which had held it together for millennia, began to waver. Cracks appeared in the crystal walls, and Jake could feel the ancient structure beginning to collapse. "The station is failing," Tom reported. "We need to get back to the ship." But Jake looked at Lyra, broken and alone after 10,000 years of self-imposed exile, and made a choice that was purely human in its compassion. "Come with us," he offered. Lyra stared at him in amazement. "You would take me with you? After what I almost did?" "You made a mistake," Jake said simply. "People do that, but they also get second chances to do better." For the first time in millennia, Lyra smiled with genuine warmth instead of cosmic serenity. "I had forgotten," she whispered. "I had forgotten what mercy looked like." But even as she reached toward Jake's offered hand, the station's collapse accelerated. The ancient systems that had preserved impossible technologies for 10,000 years were finally failing. And in that failure, both Jake Morrison and the last of the Eternals would discover what it truly meant to choose hope over preservation, growth over perfection, and love over possession. The crystal chamber collapsed around them as 10,000 years of preserved time finally began to flow again. Lyra reached for Jake's outstretched hand, but as their fingers touched, she stopped. "I cannot," she whispered, tears like liquid starlight running down her face. "Don't you see? I am the last of the Eternals, but I am also the worst of them. My people chose to fade away gracefully when their time ended. I chose to cling to existence through force of will alone." Jake felt the truth of her words through their connection. Lyra was not really alive in any meaningful sense. She was a memory that had refused to fade, a ghost of cosmic power sustained only by her inability to let go. "The other Eternals," he said, understanding flooding through him. "They didn't die in the catastrophe. They chose to end their existence when they realized they had completed their purpose." Lyra nodded sadly. "We were meant to guide younger races to wisdom, then step aside when our work was done. But I loved too much to let go. I loved you. I loved humanity. I loved the beautiful civilization we had built together. So when the time came to fade away, I hid myself in this station and held on to existence through pure, stubborn will." The station shook violently, and Jake could hear Emma's voice over the communication system. "Captain, the structure is collapsing. We need to evacuate now." But Jake couldn't leave Lyra alone to face what she had been avoiding for millennia. "Come with us anyway. Even if you're not truly alive, you're still real to me." Lyra smiled with infinite sadness. "My beloved Kale, Jake, do you remember the word I spoke when we first met in this chamber?" "Remember," Jake said. "Yes. I asked you to remember the past. But there was another word I should have spoken, one that my people understood, but I was too afraid to say." Jake felt the weight of cosmic knowledge pressing against his mind. But now it felt different. Not like a prison or a gift, but like a choice he was free to make or refuse. "What word?" he asked. "Forget," Lyra whispered. "Sometimes love means forgetting the past so the future can be born." The chamber cracked open to space, and Jake felt the pull of vacuum. But Lyra's power held a bubble of atmosphere around them. "For a few moments longer, I need to tell you the deepest truth," she said urgently. "The catastrophe that ended the First Empire, it wasn't a cosmic disaster or a choice to start over. It was me." Jake stared at her in shock. "What?" "My refusal to accept ending, my desperate clinging to what was. It created a paradox in the fabric of space-time itself. Reality began to tear apart around my stubborn will to preserve the past. The other Eternals and the humans of that time had to choose. Let the universe itself be damaged by my inability to let go, or sacrifice their civilization to heal the wound I had created." The truth hit Jake like a physical blow. "They gave up everything to fix what you broke, and I was too proud, too afraid, too much in love with what we had been, to accept my responsibility. So I hid in this station and told myself I was preserving something precious, when really I was just hiding from the consequences of my own fear." Jake felt both Kale's cosmic understanding and Jake Morrison's human compassion responding to her confession. She had caused the fall of a galactic civilization through her inability to accept loss. But she had also spent 10,000 years in isolation, tormented by what she had done. "The crew," he said suddenly. "My crew on the Wanderer. Are they in danger because of this?" Lyra nodded sadly. "My presence creates instability in reality itself. The closer I get to human civilization, the more damage I cause to the fabric of space-time. That's why I have remained isolated all these years." Through the communication system, Jake could hear his crew fighting the effects of Lyra's proximity. Their human identities were holding, but barely. Emma's voice came through strained with effort. "Captain, whatever's happening over there, it's affecting the entire ship. We're detecting massive space-time distortions." Jake realized the terrible truth. Lyra couldn't leave the station without endangering every human she came near. And the station itself was finally collapsing after 10,000 years of artificial preservation. "You have to let go," he said gently. "Not just of the past, but of existence itself. It's the only way to stop the damage. Lyra looked at him with eyes that held the depth of eternity. I know. I have always known. But I was too frightened, too selfish to do what needed to be done. What changed? You did. Seeing you choose your human identity over cosmic power, watching your crew fight to remain themselves rather than accept transcendence. You reminded me what courage looks like. Real courage isn't clinging to power or trying to preserve beauty forever. It's accepting loss and choosing to let something precious end so something new can begin. The station groaned around them, massive crystal formations breaking apart and floating into space. Jake could feel the artificial atmosphere beginning to fail. I have one last gift to give, Lyra said, raising her hands. Power flowed from her, but not the consuming force she had used before. This was gentle, healing energy that touched Jake's fractured consciousness and made him whole. He felt Kale's memories settle into their proper place, not as a competing identity, but as part of his complete self. He was Jake Morrison, ship, captain and explorer, who had once been something more but had chosen to become something real. The cosmic knowledge was still there, but filtered through human wisdom and held in check by human compassion. Now I give you the word I should have spoken long ago, Lyra said, her form beginning to fade as she finally released her hold on existence. Forget the burden of cosmic responsibility. Remember only the love that made it worthwhile. And forgive me for holding on so long to something that was meant to be let go. I forgive you, Jake said, meaning it completely. And I'll remember you, but not as you were in this tomb. I'll remember you as you should have been. Someone brave enough to let go when love demanded it. Lyra smiled, and for a moment she looked not like a cosmic being of terrible power, but like a woman who had finally found peace after a very long journey. Thank you, she whispered, for teaching me that love isn't possession, but release. That wisdom isn't preserving the past, but trusting the future. She spoke one final word, not in any language, but directly to Jake's heart. Goodbye. And then she was gone, not in a burst of cosmic energy, but quietly, like a candle being gently blown out. The station began its final collapse, but as it died, Jake felt something beautiful happen. The space-time distortions that Lyra's presence had created began to heal. Reality settled back into its proper patterns, the last thing he saw before. The emergency transport beam pulled him back to the Wanderer was the neutron star, no longer distorted by artificial preservation, spinning quietly in the cosmic dark like a lighthouse beacon for travelers who had finally learned the difference between preserving the past and honoring it. Back on the ship, Emma caught him as he materialized on the transport pad. Jake, are you all right? What happened to the woman? The station? Jake looked at her, really looked, and saw both the brilliant scientist he had worked with for 18 months and something more. He saw someone who had fought to save his identity when cosmic forces tried to erase it. Someone who had chosen to stand with him even when he wasn't sure who he was. She let go, he said simply. Finally, she let go. And as the Wanderer turned, away from the collapsing station, Jake Morrison carried within him the memories of two lives, but the wisdom to know which one was truly his. 3 months after leaving the Crystal Station, the Wanderer returned to Earth space. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the blue-green world grow larger on the main screen, and felt something he had never experienced before. The simple joy of coming home to a place he had chosen rather than inherited. The crew had recovered from their encounter with Lyra's influence, but they were all changed in subtle ways. Mike Johnson still fixed the ship's engines, but now he understood them as living things that needed care rather than just maintenance. Lisa Park communicated across space with new skill, as if she could hear the emotions behind the words. Paul, Wright navigated with an intuitive understanding of how space folded and flowed, but they were still themselves, still human, still flawed, still beautiful in their imperfection. "Captain," Emma said from her science station, "Earth Traffic Control is requesting our mission report." Jake smiled. Emma had been the anchor that kept him tethered to his human identity during the crisis. In the months since, he had come to understand that what he felt for her was both simpler and more complex than cosmic love. It was the choice to care about someone not because they were perfect or eternal, but because they were real and present and willing to share the journey. "Tell them we have a lot to discuss," Jake replied, "but the short version is that we found evidence of humanity's past and chose to keep our future. The mission report would be complicated." Jake carried within him knowledge of technologies that could advance human civilization by centuries, faster than light communication, methods for extending human lifespan, techniques for terraforming worlds. But it was knowledge filtered through, human wisdom, offered as possibilities rather than imposed as requirements. "Are you going to tell them about the cosmic empire?" Tom asked. "About what we used to be?" Jake considered this. He remembered being Kale, remembered the golden age of crystal cities and ships that sailed between galaxies. But he also remembered why humanity had chosen to give up that glory, because perfection was a kind of death, and growth required the courage to risk failure. "I'll tell them we have a choice to make," Jake said finally. "We can try to reclaim what we once were, or we can become what we choose to be. I know which option I prefer." Over the following weeks, as Jake submitted his reports to Earth Command and the scientific community, he watched humanity grapple with the knowledge he brought back. Some people were excited by the possibility of reclaiming their cosmic heritage. Others were frightened by the implications. Most were simply trying to understand what it all meant. Jake found himself in an unexpected role, not as a prophet of humanity's cosmic destiny, but as an advocate for their right to choose that destiny for themselves. He spoke at conferences and briefings, always emphasizing the same message. The knowledge was available, but the choice of how to use it belonged to everyone. "The beings who came before us learned that imposed perfection is just another kind of prison," he told a gathering of world leaders. "They chose to step aside and let their successors find their own path. We should honor that choice by making our own." Dr. Emma Walsh worked alongside him, analyzing the scientific data they had recovered and developing ethical frameworks for its application. She was brilliant at translating cosmic concepts into human terms, at finding ways to advance civilization, without losing the essential qualities that made it worth preserving. Late one evening, as they worked together in Jake's office at Earth Command, Emma looked up from her datapad and asked the question that had been hanging between them for months. "Do you miss it? Being Kale? Having cosmic power?" Jake thought about this carefully. He could still access Kale's memories when he chose to, could still understand the mathematics that described how reality bent around consciousness. But those memories felt like looking at photographs of someone else's life. Real, but not his. "I miss the certainty," he said finally. Kale knew his place in the universe, knew his purpose. Jake Morrison has to figure it out as he goes along. "And you prefer that?" "I prefer having the choice. I prefer being responsible for who I become rather than just accepting who I was." Emma smiled and reached across the desk to take his hand. "For what it's worth, I prefer Jake Morrison too. Kale sounds impressive, but Jake is the one who chose to save his crew over claiming cosmic power. Jake is the one who learned that love means letting go." Jake squeezed her hand, thinking about Lyra's final lesson. Love wasn't about preserving something forever, but about caring enough to let it grow and change. It wasn't about possession, but about the courage to risk loss for the chance of something real. "What happens now?" Emma asked. "Where does humanity go from here?" Jake looked out the window at the stars, no longer seeing them as territory to be reclaimed, but as possibilities to be explored. Somewhere out there were other young civilizations finding their own paths. Someday, humans might encounter them and have to choose whether to guide or to interfere, whether to share wisdom or impose it. "We go forward," he said. "Slowly, carefully, making our own mistakes and learning from them. We become whatever we have the courage to become. Not cosmic rulers. Maybe someday, but only if we choose it freely, and only if we can do it without losing what makes us human." Emma nodded, understanding. They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had faced the choice between transcendence and authenticity and chosen to remain themselves. In the months that followed, humanity did begin to change. The technologies Jake brought back were carefully studied and gradually implemented. Human lifespan increased, but not dramatically. Interstellar travel became easier, but not effortless. The changes were evolutionary rather than revolutionary, guided by human wisdom rather than cosmic imperative. Some people were disappointed that the transformation wasn't more dramatic. They had hoped for instant elevation to godhood, for freedom from all struggle and limitation. But Jake, carrying the memories of someone who had experienced such elevation, knew that they had chosen the harder but more rewarding path. Years later, when the first human colonies were established around other stars, Jake Morrison commanded one of the exploration ships that helped them find new homes. He was older now, gray-haired and lined with the passage of time, but his eyes still held the wonder of someone who had chosen his own adventure. Emma was with him, as was most of his original crew from the Wanderer. They had become more than colleagues. They were family, bound together by shared experience and mutual choice. They explored the galaxy not as conquerors or inheritors, but as curious children discovering what lay beyond the next hill. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between stars, Jake would remember Lyra's final words. "Forget the burden of cosmic responsibility. Remember only the love that made it worthwhile." He had done exactly that. He had forgotten the weight of ruling the galaxy, but remembered the joy of exploring it. He had forgotten the power to reshape worlds, but remembered the satisfaction of helping them grow naturally. He had forgotten the loneliness of cosmic consciousness, but remembered the warmth of human connection. And when new civilizations were discovered, humanity approached them not as guides or teachers, but as fellow travelers on the long journey from darkness to light. They shared what they had learned, but never forced their choices on others. They had learned through painful experience that the greatest gift one civilization could give another was the freedom to find its own path. Jake Morrison, who had once been Kale the Cosmic Wanderer, died peacefully at the age of 93, on a small colony world where humans grew gardens under an alien sun. His last words were to Emma, who had shared his journey from the Crystal Station to the stars. "Thank you," he whispered, "for helping me choose to be human." And across the galaxy, the civilizations that humanity encountered in their slow, careful expansion remembered them not as rulers or gods, but as people who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that love means having the courage to let go, and wisdom means choosing growth over perfection. The word that had started it all, remember, had led to a greater understanding. Sometimes the most important thing to remember is when to forget, when to let go of the past and trust the future to unfold in its own time and way. Humanity had forgotten Earth once and chosen the stars. Now they remembered Earth and chose to carry its lessons with them wherever they went. Lessons about the beauty of imperfection, the value of choice, and the courage it takes to remain human in a universe full of easier alternatives.